In popular culture, Paris is often seen as the most beautiful, romantic, and highly visited city in the world. A colossal city with over 2.2 million residents, Paris is also one of the most popular tourist destinations for people across the globe. Being the capital of France, the city also plays an integral part to French history and culture. But did you know that the city possesses a rather sinister, or at least creepy story just below its streets? That's right, about 20 meters underground exists a mass grave containing the bones of millions upon millions of people in a mass network of tunnels called the Paris Catacombs. Simply laying eyes on this spot is enough to see its awe-inspiring nature, from walls lined with thousands of skulls to arches made of ribs. The catacombs were built as a solution to overcrowded graveyards in central Paris. Yet over the years, it's become a tourist attraction as well as an important historical site, or even a cultural icon. But what is the full story behind these catacombs? Why were they created, and how did they become such a popular sightseeing location? Well, today we discover the catacombs of Paris. I'm your host Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. This video is brought to you by Morning Brew, a free daily newsletter sent directly to your inbox. In the past, my mornings were filled with the type of news that made me feel stressed out for the rest of the day. But that's all changed thanks to Morning Brew. You see, after signing up for their free daily newsletter, delivered Mondays through Sundays, I've been exposed to a healthy variety of information, keeping me up to speed on business, finance, and tech in just 5 minutes. Traditional news is too sensationalized and manipulative, but with Morning Brew, you'll experience relevant information along with some witty headlines. For example, I learned that NASA is throwing a spacecraft at an asteroid and discovered an explanation for what exactly is Times Square. These articles feed my curiosity and inspire me to learn more about our world, so there's no reason not to subscribe to Morning Brew. If you're interested in business, finance, or tech, it's completely free and takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. Sign up free by using my special link in the description below at morningbrewdaily.com/itshistory. One thing that every city or large community needs is a burial site. Obviously, Paris, being one of the biggest cities in Europe, is no different, and ever since the city was founded nearly 2,000 years ago, figuring out where and how to build burial sites was a challenging issue. The first cemeteries were built in the south of the left bank city, but as the community grew and the right bank became densely populated, more burial grounds were needed, and they were built in marshlands over the next centuries. The city continued to expand even larger, even as the Roman reign fell. However, unlike other cities, the pattern of expansion saw cemeteries built in the center of urban sprawl rather than the outskirts, which would have been more common. This would eventually become a concern with the population as, inevitably, massive amounts of graves were needed. And it was this problem that would eventually sow the seed for the creation of the Paris Catacombs hundreds of years later. Starting in the 12th century, the Saints Innocents Church in central Paris would host the city's primary cemetery and would hold that title for the foreseeable future. This burial ground was particularly historic, also serving as a cemetery for the famous Notre Dame, which was built in the 5th century. I need to once again emphasize Paris is and was a massive city with an enormous population. In fact, Paris was at one time the largest city in the entire world in the 16th century. So the cemetery at the Saints of Innocents Church would face the same problems that many other local cemeteries faced, and that obviously was a lack of space. Originally, graves would simply be piled on top of each other, but as things became unsustainable after centuries of bodies meant that there was simply no space left in the piles, apparently the problem was noticeable to the naked human eye. The graves themselves were extremely unorganized, made up of uneven patches of dirt with mounds sometimes rising up to 6 feet into the air due to the stacked bodies. Writers at the time even joked, saying that Paris was a great city to live, but a terrible city to die. By the 1870s, the older graves were then exhumed and all the bones were placed into new mass graves, which were built into the walls of the stone structures around the cemeteries, offering a rather chilling display. Imagine it, walls made of human bones. This would only be a preview for what was in store. You see, in the next few decades, the issue of overflowing graves grew completely out of control. It was unsustainable. Soon, the stone walls built to store bones provided to be a mere temporary solution to a much more serious problem. Citizens living nearby or merchants and shop owners who operated in the surrounding areas began to complain about the dreadful smells and the odors from the decomposing bodies and the dirt that was permeating throughout the city. It was even reported that the stench was so bad that perfume stores couldn't do business because the foul aromas were too strong. They covered the nice smells. Obviously, there was also a concern for disease as well. At the same time, however, there existed the issue around moving graves, as it would be disrespectful or even wrong, with the church always being wary of operations which touched the final resting places for their parishioners. The catalyst for change came in the mid-1780s when a particularly horrifying incident befell one of the local restaurant owners. He went, ironically, by the name Gravelot. Due to the change of season, there was a large amount of spring rain which loosened up the ground. So one day, when opening up shop, Gravelot walked down his basement stairs only to find a portion of the adjacent graveyard had collapsed under the sheer weight of all the stacked bodies. The dirt, as well as the stone walls, had given way, and now Gravelot's cellar was filled with rotting corpses. From this point on, the city could wait no longer. They had to act. Outside the issue of overflowing graveyards, there was also a completely unrelated predicament facing the city of Paris. The majority of the left bank was built upon massive limestone deposits. In fact, most of the early city was built out of this limestone. Over the years, the limestone was extracted from the ground by many tunnels under the loosely populated suburban areas, and so much was obtained that the mines became depleted. As Paris grew and consumed the surrounding suburbs, these old, abandoned, and mostly forgotten tunnels were now directly underneath parts of the city. And by the late 18th century, the mining operations came back to haunt Paris, as now several cave-ins and sinkholes appeared. This then prompted Louis XVI to establish an investigation into the accidents, where the network of underground mining tunnels was rediscovered. Do you see where I'm headed? A major synergy was at hand. The city officials decided to solve both of these pressing issues at the same time by repairing the tunnels and moving all of the graves there. And by the mid-1780s, the Paris Catacombs began construction. Immediately, the city began emptying the massive graveyards, and in order to avoid scaring the residents or angering the church, it was all done in the middle of the night. After digging up old graves, bones were uprooted and transported into quarry wells. More and more cemeteries were exhumed over the years leading up to the French Revolution, and the amount of bones in the catacombs continued to grow in size. In total, it's been estimated that anywhere from 6 to 7 million bodies were moved into the catacombs. Very soon, an era of violence, chaos, and destruction would descend upon France, supplying the catacombs with many fresh corpses to be buried there, due to the high amount of deaths during that period. In fact, many prominent figures of the French Revolution would have their final resting place in the Paris Catacombs. Ultimately, it wouldn't be until 1860 when the city officials stopped burying bodies here. As for the catacombs themselves, the entire complex is essentially a series of tunnels or corridors that was turned into one massive tomb. Bones were placed in artistic fashion along the walls, within containers alongside Catholic icons and other decorations, such as various old headstones from the original cemetery, statues, and artifacts. Seeing walls lined from the ground to the ceiling with skulls or arches, corners built from femurs and ribs are a common sight. A well was also constructed over one of the larger hallways, and this was how most of the bones would be transported underground. The process took about 12 years to complete. At first, the bones were completely unorganized and placed with little rhyme or reason, but as construction continued, more effort was put into making the catacombs presentable, with the idea that perhaps it could be visited by the common citizen. A series of eventual renovations added several new features together with organization of bones. For example, many plaques and tablets offer directions, historical context, quotes, or information about what's contained within the room. Bone arrangements sometimes include oddities such as skeletal deformities. The Paris catacombs as a whole also borrow a lot of inspiration from Roman catacombs in Italy. It was this time period that there was a particular cultural fashion with aesthetics and architecture. So in many ways, even though the catacombs feature bones from over 1,000 years ago, it is very much a product of French 18th century culture, and I guess you might be wondering if it's possible to visit. As early as 1809, the Paris catacombs were open to the public for visitation and tourism. From this point on, the vast underground tomb would become a cultural icon of Paris and a popular destination for travelers. At first, visitors had to schedule an appointment, but due to high demand, it became an open space for anyone. Even Napoleon III visited with his family. If you were to visit the catacombs today, there is a little over a mile of tunnel to explore, open to the general public. This takes about 45 minutes, and guides are available, but they are not necessary, meaning that you can investigate the walls of bones on your own accord if you wish. The catacombs are also home to many different events and activities, such as exhibitions, museums, bookstores, and other shops. As the catacombs became such an important part of culture, it was also inevitable that they would become tied to French history in general. As we mentioned before, the underground tomb played a role in the French Revolution, but the catacombs also saw a violent squabble in which some monarchists were killed. Fast forward to World War II, and the Paris catacombs were actually used by the French resistance as a headquarters, and many of the liberation operations were planned there during the Nazi occupation of France. Conversely, the German army actually built an underground bunker in a small section of the tunnels as well. It should also be mentioned that given the fact that the catacombs are underground and not easily accessible, they have also become an area for various unique yet illegal activities as of late. Thievery has become an issue due to some of the expensive artifacts that are found within the catacombs, and the structure makes it hard for authorities to catch the thieves. Also, in 2004, the Paris police discovered an unlicensed movie theater, fully equipped with a massive screen, cinema seats, a professional projector, countless reels of horror movies, and even a bar and restaurant. Speaking of horror movies, the simple fact that the Paris catacombs is a massive underground graveyard has attracted many filmmakers. In fact, in 2014, the horror blockbuster As Above, So Below was filmed on location here in the catacombs. The plot of the movie revolves around a group of ambitious explorers who venture into an uncharted part of the catacombs, only to accidentally upset a curse which leads them to the gates of hell. So whether it's to see the creepy sights of walls made of 1,000-year-old bone, to learn the history of Paris from the point of view of its graveyard, or just to take a nice underground hike, the Paris catacombs is definitely an attraction that has much to offer in many different aspects. Built originally as a solution to the overflowing graveyards in central Paris, the catacombs have now evolved into an integral part of the proud city's culture and history, where it will remain for years to come. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. Don't miss our playlist, Tales of Urban Decay. And remember, you can always DM me your episode ideas on Instagram. Until next time, guys, this is Ryan Sokash, signing off.